I'm Dr. Manuel Astruc. I'm a board-certified psychiatrist. I help entrepreneurs who are suffering from depression get back to being energetic, productive, and very confident. How in the world do medications help with depression? Now, for an individual who's not in the field, this is not critical information to know, but many people, when they come into my office, they want to know, like, what is the medicine doing to me, and how come this is going to work for me? So here's the high-level view of medications. Psychiatric medications were first discovered in the 1950s. The first medication, and actually the second medication, it was sheer luck that we found out that these medications helped with mood. So the first one was a medicine called isoniazid. It was an anti-tuberculosis medication. It's an antibiotic, and it was being used to treat people with tuberculosis. And these folks lived in sanatoriums that were in, high altitudes with little humidity to help them with their breathing and whatnot. And there's these famous pictures of these people in their day rooms just smiling and laughing because the medicine inadvertently seemed to be helping their mood as well. And what was discovered was that isoniazid was the first what we call MAOI inhibitors. MAOI stands for monoamine oxidase inhibitor. And monoamine oxidase is an enzyme that is important for the metabolism of some neurotransmitters in the brain. So dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. And when that medication was given and it inhibited MAO, what resulted was an elevation in the amount of dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine that was in the brain cells, in individuals' brains. And that was the first time that we started to have an idea and an understanding that depression had a biochemical etiology, right? That was the cause. The next antidepressant that was found shortly after that was actually a medicine that was being used as an antihistamine, and it's called imipramine. And imipramine belongs to a class that we know called the tricyclic antidepressants. But with the finding of these two antidepressants that were fortuitously found, there was just a ton of research that went into finding other medicines that were like them to help with depression, and a lot of research into what were the biochemical causes of depression that we could impact with medications. Let me give you a quick aside on medication and the naming of medications, because sometimes it gets confusing. When a medication first comes out, it comes out with the brand name. So we'll use Prozac. Prozac was first introduced by a company that had invested time, money, and energy to prove that it worked and that it was safe. And when it came out, they were able to give it a brand name, which is Prozac. Now, in the industry, after about 10 years, the company that had a brand name medication loses the patent on it. And then there are generic medications that are same active ingredient, but they can't be called Prozac. They go by the generic name. So the generic name for Prozac is fluoxetine, and we'll use those interchangeably, and it sometimes gets confusing. But they're the same active medication. One's the brand name, one is the generic name for that medication. So how do medications work? Selective serotonin receptor inhibitors, Prozac, Zoloft, Paxil. They work at a neurochemical level with how brain cells are communicating with each other. So when brain cells talk to each other, there's a gap between cells that's called a synapse. And cell number 1 will send out neurotransmitters to cell number 2, which catches them. And as a result of catching those neurotransmitters, that cell is either going to be more excitable or it's going to be a little repressed. But it's that communication that happens with the sending and receiving of neurotransmitters that is happening with, all the billions of nerve cells and then the trillions of connections between nerve cells. And what SSRIs do is they inhibit one part of that communication. So nerve cell 1 sends out a transmitter. Let's say that transmitter is serotonin, which is what we're working on with SSRIs. After it releases it and cell number 2 catches it, there's some serotonin that's left in that synapse, in the space between the two cells. And the brain doesn't just leave neurotransmitters laying around, right? It's very efficient and it's going to clean that up. And there's two mechanisms for cleaning that up. There's some enzymes that will come in and break down the neurotransmitters in the synapse. And also, cell number 1 that actually sent out the serotonin has a reuptake inhibitor. So it sends it out and then it sucks up any serotonin that's left in that synapse. And that reuptake is what the SSRIs block. They block that reuptake of serotonin. What that does is that it effectively increases the amount of serotonin that cell number 2 is exposed to. Now, as a result of that, there's a whole cascade of things that have to happen over, immediate days, weeks, even months sometimes, and for there to be an effect or an impact on your depression. The SSRIs will start blocking that reuptake inhibitor almost immediately after you start taking them, but improvement from medications can still take 2 to 4 weeks. So even though the medication is doing what it does initially, it's that cascade, and we don't know all the steps by any stretch. It's that cascade that ultimately causes an improvement in depression. There are a handful of other medications that are very commonly used, and they're all impacting neurotransmitters in one way or another. So another set of medications that we will commonly talk about are SNRIs. These are selective serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, and just like the SSRIs, they're working to inhibit that reuptake, but the SNRIs are inhibiting two neurotransmitters, serotonin and norepinephrine. There's a medication called Wellbutrin or bupropion. That one actually works on dopamine and norepinephrine. And there's more and more newer antidepressants that are constantly coming onto the market. But at the end of the day, what all of them are doing is they're impacting the way nerve cells are communicating with each other in various ways. One of the treatment modalities that I'm incredibly excited about is transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's a technology that's been FDA approved for over 10 years now. My practice has just started using it. It involves using very strong magnets that we put close to the head, and by pulsing magnetic fields, we cause electrical currents at the very, very surface of the brain. It's not dangerous. There's very few side effects. But what's really nice about this is, number one, it's incredibly effective, and number two, it doesn't involve taking medications.